Hey guys, tonight, we begin not with grand kings or gleaming castles, but in the quiet, cold breath of morning, in a time when survival didn't come with ceremony. You wake in the year 1325, not on a mattress, but on straw flattened by your weight and shared by every flea who's made your body their lodging. There is no softness here, only the rustle of hay, the creak of damp wood, and the faint warmth of others sleeping close by limbs, overlapping like tangled roots. You probably wouldn't survive doing this back in the day. Not because you're weak, but because no one's ready for this kind of life until they've lived it. And most don't last long enough to learn who. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is right now. And if your day was full of deadlines and noise, take this time to forget it all. Let your mind wander, float, and dream a little. This story isn't urgent. It's just here for you to enjoy and rest alongside. May your. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft back rose. You shift under a wool blanket that hasn't been washed since winter, and now carries the scent of smoke, damp earth, and something sour, the shared odor of life, hard and uninterrupted. The chill in the air seeps into your bones before you've even moved, and the low ceiling above you drips with the memory of last night's rain. There's no alarm clock, no soft chime from your phone, just the rooster arrogant and unrepentant declaring dawn with all the subtlety of a trumpet blast. You sit up slowly, brushing straw from your skin. The floor beneath your feet isn't wooden or tiled, it's soil. Cold, solid, and unforged, the cottage is still, not silent, but filled with the quiet presence of others. Your siblings, your parents, a cousin perhaps, all sharing this one small room where sleep meals, prayers, and quarrels happen in the same breath. The fire's burned low, and the ashes still glow faintly. You poke at it with a stick, coaxing it back to life, and it answers with a sigh and a flicker. There's comfort in that. You reach for your shoes. They don't match. One is too tight, the other too loose. Leather stretched, cracked, softened by years of feet that walked before yours. They were your brothers. Now they're yours. That's how things work here. Nothing begins with you. Nothing ends with you either. Outside, the morning mist clings to the grass, and the world is gray, heavy, and half asleep. Your breath ghosts in the air as you step into it. There's no pavement, no path, only a trail of packed mud and old footsteps leading toward the well. If the water isn't frozen, you're lucky. If it is, you'll break the ice and hope the layer beneath doesn't carry the taste of rot. Your hands are red from cold before you've even reached the bucket. You wince as you splash your face. It stings sharp, bracing, and oddly welcome. Clean is a relative term. You rinse not to be clean, but to feel something that isn't the weight of sleep or the ache of hunger. Back inside, your mother's stirring the pot, not out of hope, but habit. The stew is mostly yesterday's water and a few root scraps, thick, gray, and familiar. The kind of meal that tastes like effort more than anything else. You'll eat it anyway. Everyone does. No one speaks yet. Not because there's peace, but because there's nothing new to say. The dog curls tighter by the hearth. A sibling snores softly. The world outside is waking, but inside time moves slower. And you are alive. That's the start of everything. The cottage creaks, as the sun stretches over the hilltops, lighting your small village, a scattering of roofs, smoke drifting upward like breath. No one writes about this place. It isn't on any map. But here lives unfold in quiet, worn rhythms. Plagues come, crops fail, children grow. And yet every morning someone stirs the coals, someone lifts a pail, someone carries on. You're part of that now, a thread in a tapestry most will never see, and in a strange, still way that matters. You step outside into the chill, your breath curling in the still air, and the mud squelching beneath your shoes. There's a quiet to early medieval mornings that feels older than the village itself, the kind of silence that hums just beneath sound. The fields beyond the cottages are frosted at the edges, and the well sits just ahead, its stones damp its rope, stiff with last night's frost. Water. You don't think about it the way someone might centuries from now. There's no faucet, no purity guarantees, no gentle whir of a filter tucked beneath the sink. There's just the hope that no dead animal has fallen in, that the geese stayed away last night, that no one with illness dipped their hands too deep. You lift the bucket and listen to it creak. The well groans softly as you draw the water up heavy, murky, and untrustworthy. If the color's clear and the smell is faint, it's a good day. But even then, you'll likely boil it later, or not. Sometimes there's not enough wood. You carry the bucket back slowly, letting it slosh against your ankles. The cold seeps through your shoes, through your socks, if you're lucky enough to have them. Inside, the water is ladled carefully, some for stew, some for rinsing, a little saved in case someone falls ill. Bathing isn't daily, it's not even weekly, not in full anyway. You might wash your hands and face in cold water, but soap is rare, and hot water even rarer. When someone does manage to bathe, it's done quickly. A shared wooden tub, a fire stoked for hours, just for a few minutes of warmth. The bath water is reused. First the father, then the sons, then the mother, then the smallest child. By the end, it's not water anymore. It's history. You smell like the fire, like the food, like the room. And no one notices because everyone does. A sour blend of sweat wool wood smoke and effort. Your scent is your signature, honest, unavoidable, and undeniably alive. Rainwater is collected in barrels by the side of the house. It seems like a gift until you notice the mosquito larvae twitching just beneath the surface, or the dead leaf that's been dissolving since last week. Still on laundry days, if the sun blesses you, you'll use it. Clothes are washed in cold water, beaten with wooden paddles, then hung on hedges to dry. Sometimes the wind carries them away. Sometimes the pigs chew holes in them. You fix what you can and wear what's left. You've heard of bathhouses in cities, stories passed down from the mouths of traveling monks and merchants, places where strangers sit side by side in hot pools of scented water. It sounds decadent. It also sounds deeply suspicious. Why would anyone want to bathe with strangers, or bathe at all unless they had to? Historians still argue whether most medieval people truly believed water itself could cause sickness. Some feared that warm water opened the pores and let disease sneak in. Others feared demons lived in lakes. You fear the shiver that comes after washing your feet in winter more than any devil. There's also the river, if you're desperate, if you know where it curves past the woods, if the bandits haven't been seen lately, if the wolves are sleeping, but the river is a place of myth. People talk about it like they talk about saints, with reverence and distance. You've never seen it yourself, just heard it in the tone of voices when they say to the north. You drink your share of the water, boiled lightly, maybe flavored with herbs, or thin ale if someone traded for it. Ale is safer, not strong, not sweet, just dull enough to make the water seem clean. Children drink it, the elderly drink it. It's not about luxury, it's about survival. Even the youngest among you learn to take small sips to notice if the taste turns sharp. And when illness does come, when someone starts coughing or the fever creeps in, the water is boiled twice, then cooled with whispering prayers. You bring out the good cup, the one carved from ashwood, barely chipped. You hold it to lips that tremble. Sometimes it helps, sometimes it doesn't. But always you try. You fetch water again before noon. It's your job today. The pail's handle digs into your hand. You pass your neighbor's child barefoot in the mud, balancing another bucket half her size. No one complains. Everyone carries something. Back in your cottage, the day has warmed slightly. The water is used to soften beans, to wash turnips, to fill the pot again. The same stew is stretched thinner. If it has flavor, it's borrowed, but no one asks for more. Later, you'll use the water to clean your hands after cutting meat, if there is any, to rinse the knife, to rub into the stain on your only tunic. A little is poured into a bowl for the dog, a little more for the chicken that everyone swears is too old to lay, but too beloved to cook. And just before dusk, as the wind returns and the coals begin to settle, someone will carry the bucket out again, this time slower, this time with the ache of a day etched into their back, because tomorrow the well will still be there, and so will the need. The pot is already bubbling by the time you return. Not boiling, that would suggest enthusiasm. No, it simmers in that low, half-hearted way that medieval food does, as if the ingredients are apologizing for what they're about to become. It's breakfast, though no one would call it that with any joy. A thick, glutinous mess called pottage, part porridge, part mystery, part penance. It's made from whatever was found, saved, or scraped together. A few lentils, a sad turnip, maybe a shard of onion if it's a feast day. There's no bacon. That only happens when a pig dies, which doesn't happen often, and certainly not for your convenience. And eggs. Those are gifts from the gods, or bribes for the reeve. Instead, your bowl holds a scoop of something the consistency of wet bread and the color of regret. You sit near the hearth legs crossed, spoon in hand, a carved wooden thing that's seen better meals, and worse. The stew burns your tongue not from spice, but from temperature. The flavors are mild bland and vaguely earthy, like someone steeped the concept of a vegetable. No one talks while eating. It's not a custom, it's just hard to pretend excitement. The younger children chew slowly, carefully, as if trying to uncover meaning. The older ones don't chew at all, just swallow and sigh. This is how the day begins, not with cheer, not with coffee, not with Instagrammable omelets or soft jazz in a sunny kitchen. No, here the day begins with patience and digestion. There's a comfort in it in the way an old chair might be comforting, familiar, creaky, and unlikely to collapse today. You remember stories of feasts from the priest's sermons, tables overflowing with meat, sweet wine pies shaped like swans. You wonder if he's ever tasted pottage, or if the saints ever had to soak stale bread in water to soften it enough to chew. Historians still argue whether medieval peasants were malnourished or simply underfed. There's a difference. Starvation was seasonal, real sharp, and cruel in famine years. But hunger was constant. It hovered at the edge of every meal, even the full ones. Your body knows what it's missing even when your mind stops naming it. Salt, fat, variety. The little things that make food feel like a reward instead of an obligation. Here food is medicine, functional, ritual. You eat because you must, not for pleasure, not for choice. The bread, if there is any, is dense, and dark, made from rye or barley, never wheat. Wheat is for nobles, for churches, for other people. Your bread cracks if overbaked, crumbles if not. It smells sour, but not unpleasantly so. Just honest. You tear a piece and dunk it into the pottage. It disintegrates slightly. That's good. That means it's freshish. A child spills their bowl. No one scolds. It happens. A dog licks it up before the stew soaks into the floor. Nothing's wasted. Sometimes you dream of butter, not eating it, just seeing it. A golden curl atop a hot crust, melting slowly. Once a tinker passed through with a block wrapped in cloth. He traded it for wool, then vanished. People still talk about him like a ghost. There's a dried herb in the stew today, maybe sage, maybe something misidentified. It adds a hint of something green or bitter. You try not to taste too hard. You scrape the bottom of the bowl with your spoon. That's where the real flavor lives, where everything that couldn't rise or escape settles. You know how to tilt the bowl just right, how to chase the last bits around like a game. This is skill. This is survival. Outside, the day stirs. The first carts roll by. The geese start shouting. The wind returns from wherever it went during the night. And inside, the bowls are emptied and placed by the hearth, ready to be reused, rewiped, reheated. You've never seen a table set. You've never wiped your mouth with a napkin. You've never cut meat with a knife sharp enough to slide. But you have your spoon, and it fits your hand, and when you hold it, you know it will always lead you back to the same place, this moment, this meal, this morning. Breakfast is done. No one says it aloud. It just is. The pot is left to rest, lit askew steam, curling out like a final sigh. Someone adds more water for the evening's meal. Someone tosses in a few carrot tops, a bruised radish, a hope. You rinse your bowl with a handful of lukewarm water, swirl it, sip it, call it done. That's clean enough. You stand. Your stomach isn't full, but it's not empty either. That's a good start. That's enough. And in this world, enough is everything. You get dressed with the kind of resignation normally reserved for funerals. There's no closet to browse, no drawer of freshly folded shirts. Your clothes are where you left them last night, near the hearth, trying and failing to dry. They still carry the scent of wood smoke, sour sweat, and wet wool. Your shirt is rough, not itchy sweater rough, not cheap hotel towel rough. It's woven from fibers thick enough to scrape and stiff enough to stand. You slide it on anyway, pulling the sleeves over arms already sore from yesterday. The seam at the shoulder has come loose again. You'll stitch it tonight if you remember. or not. Your trousers, or whatever passes for them, are laced at the waist with a bit of old twine. There are holes you can't explain, stains you don't question, and a patch at the knee made from a different generation's fabric. You've never owned new clothes. Not really. New things go to people with coin, people with titles, people whose shoes match. Your shoes, by the way, are wet. Again, you place your foot inside and wince at the chill that creeps up your leg. They're leather, or were once before the rain, and mud turned them into something closer to paper. One has a stone lodged in the sole. You'll dig it out later, maybe. Or you'll forget, and it'll become part of you. Underclothes, if you're lucky. If not, you layer wool over skin and hope for a breeze. If there's too much heat, you sweat. If not enough, you shiver. Either way, there's discomfort stitched into every thread. Your cloak, frayed, uneven fastened with a splintering wooden pin, isn't warm, but it makes you feel hidden. In a world with no privacy, a good cloak is the closest thing to solitude. It also keeps the chickens from pecking at your elbows. There's no mirror in your cottage. Your reflection lives in puddles and polished spoons. You've never seen your full self all at once. You wouldn't recognize yourself from behind, but you know how your sleeves roll when you lift a pail. You know which part of your tunic catches the wind just enough to cool your back on a hot day. These are the kinds of details that matter here. Historians still argue whether peasants truly saw clothing as status or just survival. The answer, as always, depends on what you've never had. Nobles wear silk. You wear wool. Nobles own wardrobes. You own a garment. And sometimes it owns you. There are colors, though. Faded blues, muddy greens, browns that once pretended to be red. Cloth is dyed with whatever's available, barkberries, roots. The colors don't last. They bleed, fade, wash away in the rain. Still you know whose tunic is whose by sight, not shade. Buttons are rare. Laces are precious. Metal clasps are heirlooms. Most fastenings are faith and habit. If it stays on, it works. When a garment tears, it's patched. When it shrinks, it's passed to someone smaller. When it wears thin, it becomes a rag. When the rag tears, it lines a shoe. Nothing goes to waste. Not thread, not cloth, not effort. Laundry happens when the weather allows, which is to say, rarely. Clothes are soaked in cold water, scrubbed with ash soap, if you have it, and beaten against flat stones until the dirt gives up, or you do. They dry in the wind on fences under hedges. Sometimes they don't dry at all. You wear them anyway. Your cap, if you wear one, is wool. It keeps lice in and judgment out. Your sleeves roll up for work. Your cloak ties tightly for travel. Everything has a purpose. There is no fashion, only function, and even that fails more often than not. The rich in their manners wear linen beneath their wool to soften the touch. They perfume their cuffs. They change garments by hour. You wear your clothing until it shapes itself to you stiff in winter, soft in spring, sour by midsummer. You dream of soft fabric the way others dream of gold. Sometimes travelers pass through merchants, monks, minstrels. They wear cloaks of many panels, boots that buckle hats with feathers. Children stare. You try not to. Their clothes speak languages you've never learned. You wrap your own cloak tighter. There's dignity in dressing each morning. A quiet defiance. A way of saying I am still here. still showing up, still part of the rhythm, even if my hem frays and my belt snaps. You tie the rope again, you adjust the tunic, you face the day, and the day waits with mud and smoke and a sky that promises more of the same. The air has warmed just enough to turn the frost to mud. Not the good kind of mud, if such a thing exists, but the sticky kind that clings to your soles and saps your strength with every step. You trudge forward anyway, because there's no choice. Not today, not any day. You've got work to do. No alarms, no morning commute. Just your feet, your tools, and the land that refuses to grow anything without a fight. You carry a wooden spade, worn smooth by your father's grip, and his father's before him. It's not just a tool, it's a baton in a never-ending relay of survival. The fields stretch beyond the village like patchwork stitched without much care, some green, some brown, some bare. You move toward the row you've been assigned, the one that always floods too early or dries too fast. You know every stone, every rut, every place where the roots get stubborn. Your job changes with the season, but not the ache. In spring, it's planting. In summer, it's sweating. In autumn, it's hoping. In winter, it's trying not to freeze. There's no off-season, only different flavors of exhaustion. You drive the spade into the soil, and the resistance starts in your hands, travels up your arms, and settles in your back. Every movement is a negotiation. Every step forward is a test of will. And this is the easy part. Later, there will be hauling threshing, maybe mending a fence that fell in the wind, or fixing a wheel that cracked from last year's frost. The animals need tending. The fences need patching. The chickens' unpredictable, judgmental little things scatter underfoot and make your job harder. The cow won't move. The goat escapes. The dog watches you with something between sympathy and amusement. There's no breakfast break, no lunch hour, just tasks. And if you forget one, it doesn't forgive you. A missed chore means a broken tool, a lost chicken, a hole in the roof that lets the cold in just enough to wake the baby, who wakes the house, who ruins the next day before it even begins. Historians still argue whether medieval labor was truly harder than today's, but they didn't have ibuprofen padded gloves or a union, and no one cared about your sore back unless you couldn't bend anymore. Then you became someone else's burden, and burdens don't last long in villages like this. The sun climbs higher. You take off your cloak tie. Your sleeves rub the dirt into your palms for grip. Your skin is rough. Splinters live under your nails. Your joints pop when you twist, but you keep going. Someone walks by on the way to the next field, a cousin maybe, or your neighbor's eldest. You nod. They nod. No words. Just breath-shared effort and a kind of solidarity forged from mutual discomfort. The wind shifts. The scent of smoke drifts from the village hearths. Somewhere a baby is crying. Somewhere else someone is cursing loudly about a broken cart. These are the sounds of daily life. Not music, but rhythm, repetition. The same notes played over and over, because that's how things keep going. By mid-morning, the mud has dried just enough to turn to dust. You taste it when you breathe. It sticks to your teeth, to the inside of your nose. You wipe your face on your sleeve and leave a streak behind. You don't count hours. You count shadows. The way the light moves across the trees, the slope of the hills. You can tell how close it is to noon by how your spine feels when it begins to hum like a taut string. You pause, stretch, and hear something crack. That's how you know you've earned a sip of water. You sit on a stone sip from a shared gourd and let the wind cool your face. It's not refreshing, but it's different. And different is something. You might eat something now, a crust of bread, maybe a bit of cheese hardened by time and travel. You chew slowly, not because it's good, but because it makes the moment last. Your hands rest on your knees. Your head tilts toward the sun. You think of nothing in particular, because thinking too much is dangerous. It leads to longing, and longing is a luxury. Then someone calls your name, not loudly, just enough. Breaks over, you rise. The ache returns instantly, but you carry it like a coat you've worn too long to take off. You return to your row, your tool, your role in the silent choreography of survival. The day continues. The mud thickens, then thins. The wind rises, then drops. And you keep moving through it, not because you love it, but because this is what life is: motion, repetition, ache. And somehow, through it all, a kind of peace. The village isn't large. It doesn't need to be. A cluster of slumped cottages, a well at the center, a chapel that leans slightly to the left, and a stretch of trampled earth that pretends to be a road. That's all. No signs, no gates, no names carved in stone. Just the place where everyone ends up always. You know every face here, and every face knows yours. There are maybe 40 people, give or take a few births, a few quiet passings. No one moves in, no one moves out. The world outside exists, but it's distant, abstract, like a story told to children or a dream forgotten after waking. Your name isn't important. Well, not really. It's passed down, repeated, whispered during prayer, shouted across fields, and written nowhere. Most people in this village have the same few names anyway, differentiated not by lineage, but by necessity. There's Old Thomas and Young Thomas Big Anna, and Other Anna, and a boy they just call Crow because he caws when he laughs. There's no privacy, but also no secrets. Everyone knows who argues, who drinks, who borrows without asking, and who leaves offerings at the chapel steps, even when no one's watching. But they pretend not to know until they have to. You walk the same path to the fields each day, nod to the same goat tethered outside the same house, dodge the same chicken who believes the entire road is hers. The familiar becomes background noise until it changes. When someone falls ill, or someone's cart returns empty, or the wrong smoke rises from the wrong chimney, the entire village notices at once. It pulses like one body, one set of lungs. The center of town, if you can call it that, is a muddy circle where shoes disappear and gossip thrives. You might hear that the miller's wife is expecting again, or that the priest has been muttering about a vision he saw in the snow, or that someone's sheep has been acting funny, which means anything from possessed to merely stubborn. Historians still argue whether these villages were isolated by choice or by force. Maybe both, maybe neither. But inside this loop of people and pathways, you live with a strange duality. You are always seen, and yet often invisible. The chapel stands as the tallest building, but barely. It holds the stories no one wants to admit aloud. Weddings whispered rather than celebrated. Funerals so quiet they feel unfinished. Baptisms done quickly in cold water. with names chosen less for meaning than for ease of remembrance. Next to it, the field for burials. No gravestones, only wooden markers, and small stones set in place by hand. You don't walk through it, not out of fear, but respect. Everyone there was someone, just like you will be. You help raise each other's roofs. You lend the tools, lose them, find them again months later in someone else's shed. You trade bread for eggs, wool for soap, stories for silence. The currency here is cooperation, and the price of withdrawal is loneliness. You've known these people since you were born. You'll know them until you die. You've seen every face under candlelight, moonlight, firelight. You've shared soup sorrow and laughter with them all. When a child cries, 3 women go to check. When a fence breaks, 2 men show up with twine and tired eyes. No one waits to be asked. And still, not everything is shared. Some griefs are buried. Some loves are hidden. Some truths are only ever spoken to the sky. You remember a man who left, just walked down the path toward the woods one morning, and never came back. No one asked why. They just said he went beyond the trees, as if that explained anything, as if that didn't happen to dreams too. But not everyone dreams of leaving. Some are content or claim to be. They take pride in their craft, their family, their patch of land that somehow yields just enough. They find rhythm in repetition, beauty in function, peace in familiarity. Your house is one of many, none of them distinct. Roofs patched with reeds walls, leaning like tired shoulders doors that never quite close. Inside, the same fire burns, the same stew simmers, the same hope lingers. There is a kind of smallness here that wraps around you, not like a prison, but like a blanket. You fit into this place, not because you were chosen, but because it never asked for anything else. And maybe that's enough. The village hums with the sound of living laughter behind a closed shutter, the thump of someone splitting wood, a lullaby sung off-key by a mother with a hoarse voice. These aren't songs anyone records, but they're remembered. You walk back home in the soft light of late afternoon. The fields are quiet now. The chickens settled. The dog curled beneath the same bench he always claims. You step inside, nod to whoever looks up, and set your tools down. Tomorrow this village will be the same, so will you. And there is comfort in that. The chapel bell rings once then again, as if the sky itself is clearing its throat. It's not loud, but it cuts through the village like a thin blade. Everyone hears it. No one rushes. No one needs to. The sound doesn't call you. It reminds you. Mass isn't optional, but not because of law or fear, because of rhythm. Like the morning pottage or the evening fire, it simply is. You go because it's what comes next, because you always have. Inside the chapel, it smells of wax and wood smoke. The walls are rough stone, unevenly whitewashed. The floor is dirt swept just enough to pretend it's clean. There are no pews, just benches. No stained glass, just slits that let in wind. The altar is bare save for a single cloth that's been mended so often it's more thread than linen. The priest stands quietly, robes a shade too large, eyes too tired. He's not a man of grandeur. He's a man of habit. He speaks in Latin mostly, though none of you understand. It doesn't matter. The cadence matters. The rhythm. The way his voice lifts during blessings and drops into whispers during confession. You kneel on aching knees, not because you feel particularly holy, but because the moment asks for it. Your hands fold, your eyes close. You whisper prayers half remembered and never fully understood. Next to you is Agnes. Agnes sees everything. She sits 3 benches back, eyes sharp as crows, and twice as curious. She knows who skipped Mass last week. She knows who left the tavern too late, who missed their tithe, whose child has a cough they're hiding. God sees your soul. Agnes sees your shoes. And while the priest speaks of heaven and judgment, Agnes files her own notes in her mind, a ledger of sins, small and large, real and imagined. It's not malice, it's vigilance. Someone must keep order, and the Lord can't be everywhere. You bow your head a little lower. Historians still argue whether peasants were truly devout or merely obedient. But you don't feel like a scholar, and you don't feel like a heretic. You feel like someone clinging to a structure, because without it, everything might unravel. The church gives names to the seasons: Advent, Lent, Michaelmas. It gives reason to the fasting, to the feasting, to the waiting. It tells you when to plant and when to pray, when to mourn and when to hope. There's no calendar in your home, no clock. The church is your measure of time of life itself. The priest lifts the host, and all heads bow in unison. It's not just a ritual. It's a moment when the village breathes as one. Even the children go quiet. Even the wind seems to hush. For a heartbeat, everything aligns. You rise after the final blessing. Your knees crack like old wood. People file out slowly. Some cross themselves again. Some linger to whisper news or gossip. You catch Agnes eyeing you briefly, her mouth pursed like a question she'll ask later, somewhere less sacred. Outside, the sun has shifted. It's afternoon now. You're not sure how much time passed. Mass always folds time inward, makes the world feel smaller, closer. You stop by the chapel steps, touch the stone for luck. Not everyone does it, not always. But today, you need it. There's been a strange bird circling the fields. There's been talk of spoiled grain, of wolves, of fever. You glance toward the priest's door. He's inside already, probably sipping weak ale, probably wondering which child he'll baptize next, or bury. His ledger is full, so is his heart, but his back is bent. You wonder if he remembers the names he speaks each week. The villagers disperse, back to fences, back to hearths, back to the small tasks that define survival. Agnes walks past, doesn't say a word, just nods. That's worse than a question. That's a future conversation waiting to happen. You head home. The church doesn't end at the chapel. It follows you. It lives in the blessings whispered over stew, in the herbs hung above the door, in the iron nail driven into the threshold to keep devils away. Faith isn't Sunday only. It's woven into everything. You cross yourself before entering the cottage, not because you're scared, but because your mother always did, and she said it helped her sleep, and you'd like to sleep. Inside the house smells like wet wood and old shoes. Someone's stirring the pot again. Someone's mumbling about the price of salt. You sit near the fire, stretch your legs, and think about the next thing that needs doing. There's always a next thing. You glance toward the chapel through the window. The bell is silent now. The sky is pale. Agnes is gone. But God is still watching. Your hands are cracked before the frost fully thaws. Red in the creases, raw across the knuckles, nails dark with soil. You don't remember when they started hurting. It's not a sharp pain, it's dull, constant, like the hum of a low drum beneath everything you do. You stretch your fingers, they resist. You flex your shoulders, they complain. You bend your back, and it speaks in sharp, sudden syllables. You've grown used to your own sounds, the creaks, the pops, the quiet groans that accompany every motion. They're the hymn of your body, trying and failing to keep up. You weren't built for ease. No one here was. Your feet are wide from years, without arch support. Your joints stiff from work done too young. Your muscles hardened in places and worn away in others. There's a line of callus across your palms that will never leave. It's as familiar as your own name. And yet, you keep moving. Your teeth ache. Not always, but often enough. A throbbing in the molar when the weather shifts. A sharp jolt when you bite something tougher than expected, like bread left too close to the fire. There's no dentist, no clean tools, just whispers of a man in the next village who pulls teeth with a dagger and a prayer. You'd go, but he charges a hen, so you chew on the other side. You rinse with warm ale. You pray it goes away. Your breath is not sweet. No one's is. No one brushes. No one flosses. You chew mint leaves when they're in season. You scrape with twigs when you remember. The taste of iron in your mouth is no longer alarming. You've made peace with blood. Historians still argue whether peasants lived in constant pain or simply accepted discomfort as normal. Either way, there's no relief. Not unless you're lucky, and luck is rare. You twist your ankle once on a stone hidden beneath the mud. You limp for a week. No one stops working for a limp. There's no one to take your place. A cut festers if you don't catch it early. A cough lingers longer than it should. Your joints swell when the rain stays too long. There are salves made from beeswax herbs, pig fat hope. Sometimes they soothe, sometimes they sting. You apply them anyway. The midwife has a jar she swears by. It smells like vinegar and rosemary. You've used it on bruises, splinters, burns, once even a broken toe. It didn't help, but you felt better pretending it might. You're not old, but you feel older each day. By 25, your knees are unreliable. By 30, your hearing fades at the edges. By 40, your hands tremble in the morning and settle only after you've moved them for an hour or more. There are no mirrors. You see yourself in shadows, in puddles, in the way others squint at you. You know your body by feel, not by sight. By the way your shirt fits tighter around the shoulders and looser at the belly. By the scars you can trace with closed eyes. Your hair thins, grays, vanishes. Your nails grow in crooked. Your skin takes longer to heal. And still you keep moving. Because what else is there? There's no medicine beyond herbs and habit. A poultice of garlic and honey. A hot stone pressed to your chest. A whispered charm against the evil eye. When those fail, there's prayer. And when prayer fails, there's acceptance. You don't expect to feel good. You only hope to not feel worse. Your neighbor's son coughs blood into his sleeve. No one says the word plague. Not yet. But the chapel candles are lit a little earlier. The priest visits more often. Agnes watches everything with sharp eyes and soft lips. You offer your own strength where you can. Carry a bucket, mend a fence, fetch a stool. It's a trade your body for theirs, your effort for silence. You don't talk about your own pains. That would be selfish. But when the house is quiet and the fire is low and everyone else has slipped into that early night silence, you stretch your legs and feel the tremble. You roll your shoulders and feel the grind. You place your hands over your knees and feel the heat radiating from within. And you sit still just for a moment, letting the ache speak its truth, that you are tired, that you are breaking, that you are still here. You exhale, you close your eyes. Tomorrow will ask more of you, and you will give it. The cough starts in someone else's cottage, a rough wet bark that echoes faintly through the village lanes. No one says anything the first day. Coughs are common. Smoke hangs heavy in every home. Throats dry. Chests ache. It's nothing. But by the second day, it's still there, louder, harsher, closer. By the third, it spreads. Someone stops coming to the well. Someone else doesn't show for Mass. A child is carried limp to the chapel steps. A candle is lit, then another, and another. You count them in silence like tally marks carved into time. You feel it before you name it. The way people stop touching. The way eyes linger too long. The way food is passed hand to hand with sleeves drawn low. You know this. You've lived this before, or your mother did, or your mother's mother. You don't need to hear the word plague. You smell it. It's not one scent, but many. Damp rot, stale air, burnt rosemary crushed into thresholds, bodies that no longer sweat, only shiver, rooms that don't open their shutters, a village gone quiet. You press cloth to your face, soaked in vinegar, as the priest instructed. It stings your nose, makes your eyes water, but they say it helps, that it blocks the bad air, that it keeps the death out. You don't question it. When fear arrives, logic steps aside. Historians still argue whether these remedies helped. Garlic necklaces, chicken entrails, onions buried at the corners of homes, charms whispered in Latin, herbs hung from door frames, live chickens tied to buboes in hopes the sickness would transfer. It sounds absurd now, but in that moment when someone you love can no longer speak and their skin burns with fever, you'll believe in anything. People stop gathering. Meals are eaten in silence. Paths are crossed with nods, not words. Children are kept indoors. The priest visits every home with a vial of oil and a prayer. Some say he's already sick. Others say he's protected. You don't ask. He's the only one still walking house to house. You check yourself in the morning. Neck, armpits, groin for swellings, for bruises, for signs that your body has turned against you. You hide your fear, but you start praying before you rise and long after you lie down. You notice who's still lighting fires at night, who's still hanging laundry outside, who's still drawing water, and who's not. Then one day the chapel bell rings not for Mass, but for morning. A long, slow toll. Someone's gone, then another. The burials are fast. No processions, no chants, just dirt, sweat, and silence. The priest's voice cracks. The gravedigger drinks. Agnes no longer watches from the doorway. She's inside coughing. You still work. The land doesn't stop needing you. But your hands tremble now. Your back is tighter. You hold your breath when near others. You wash with cold water twice a day, scrubbing skin until it reddens. It doesn't help, but it's something to do. At night, you don't sleep. You listen to the wind, to the footsteps, to the coughs. The sound of your own heart feels louder than it should. You dream of fevers, of fire, of faces you no longer see. One morning you wake and the sky feels wrong, heavy, too quiet. You step outside and realize half the village hasn't. You carry wood to your neighbor's door and leave it there. You don't knock. You just hope they're still strong enough to open it. Later, someone returns from another town, whispering that the next village lost everyone, that carts of lime have been seen on the road, that no one will come to help, that the sickness spreads faster than feet. You don't leave. Where would you go? There are moments, strange, still ones, when you feel guilt for surviving, when the stew tastes good again, when the morning light is soft, when you laugh. You think, how dare I? But then you remember surviving is the only resistance you have. The priest dies, quietly, in his sleep. No one rings the bell. It feels too cruel. Agnes recovers, somehow. She returns to the chapel, thinner, quieter, but present. She doesn't speak of what she saw. You don't ask. The fever passes, slowly, leaves in its wake empty chairs, folded linens, untouched stories unfinished. You count the faces. You count the graves. You count yourself and find your own name still there. You kneel in the dirt one morning, planting onions, and a tear rolls down your cheek, not from sorrow, from gratitude. You are still here. You rise. Love in your world is not the kind they write about in parchment-bound tales. It doesn't begin with stolen glances or end with roses. It begins with a name spoken quietly by your parents and ends with a nod across the hearth. There are no proposals, no rings, no candles. There is understanding, agreement, a shared roof. Marriage isn't a celebration. It's an arrangement, a necessity, a binding of bodies and fortunes no matter how small. You marry young not because you're ready, but because there's work to be done, fields to tend, heirs to raise, livestock to manage, and no one does these things alone. You've seen girls promised by 12, married by 14, mothers by 15. Their hips not yet wide, their hands still soft, and yet they carry life, they carry water, they carry more than most would dare. If you are a woman, your future is charted like a furrow in soil, straight, narrow, cut by someone else's hand. You learn to cook, to sew, to bend, to kneel. You're taught to speak softly and bear sons. If you bear daughters, you pray they are beautiful enough to marry and strong enough to survive. Historians still argue whether medieval marriage was more contract than commitment. But you know there's no room for poetry in hunger. You don't fall in love. You grow into it like moss on stone, slowly, quietly, by staying near. Sometimes affection grows, shared laughter over burnt bread, a touch on the shoulder after a long day, the kind of intimacy that lives not in words, but in knowing how they snore, how they eat, how they cry, without asking. Sometimes affection fades, and you stay anyway, because leaving isn't an option, because the land needs two sets of hands, because you've already buried one child and can't bear to explain why to another. You remember your wedding, if you can call it that, a simple blessing, a shared loaf of bread, a cup passed between two mouths. The priest spoke the same words he always does. You nodded, so did he. That was enough. There was no white dress, no music, just the scraping of chairs and the whisper of gossip. Agnes said it was a good match. You still don't know what she meant. Sometimes a partner dies, quickly from fever, slowly from wear. And just like that, the arrangement ends, but life doesn't. You don't get time to mourn. You still need to milk the goat. You still need to cut wood. The cottage doesn't care who's missing from it. And so you become something else. Not wife, not widow, just someone who keeps going. Children arrive when they do, not planned, not expected, just there screaming and red, swaddled in wool demanding attention. You love them, fiercely, but that love lives beside fear, because you know how fragile they are, how easily the world swallows them. You've buried one, or two, maybe more, you don't count. It hurts less that way. You just remember their names in the order they came and the time they stayed. If you're lucky, your partner helps, fetches water, swaddles the baby, offers silence when silence is the gift. If not, you endure because someone must. Sometimes you hear stories from travelers of courts, where women choose their lovers of cities, where girls read books of queens with voices louder than kings. It sounds impossible. It sounds beautiful. But mostly it sounds distant. You wear a token from your partner, a piece of string, a bit of carved wood, a tooth once, something that proves the bond when words are too much. And in the evenings, when the stew simmers and the dog stretches, you sit close, not touching necessarily, just near, the way trees grow beside each other quietly, without fanfare but together. You don't expect romance, but you hope for warmth, and when you get it in a smile, a bowl shared, a hand brushed against yours, you hold it tight, because in this life, love is not loud, but it is real. Dinner doesn't arrive. It is made, slowly, carefully, with what little the day allowed. You gather around the hearth as the shadows lengthen, not to feast, but to fill. The air is smoky. The pot is heavy. The expectations are low. What's inside is no surprise. It's what was left, yesterday's broth, softened roots, bread gone hard around the edges. If you're lucky, there's a slice of meat. If you're very lucky, there's a bit of fat clinging to it. The stew bubbles like a whisper, and someone stirs it clockwise, always clockwise. A superstition, perhaps. Or maybe it's just the way things have always been. The ladle is passed, and each bowl is filled just enough to warm your fingers as you cradle it. You don't speak while eating. Words would waste breath, and breath wastes warmth. You chew not to savor, but to soften. Bread is dipped, torn, shared. The crust goes to the oldest, the soft center to the youngest. You always know your place in the bowl. There is no spice. Salt is precious, hoarded like silver. Pepper exists in story more than reality. Flavor comes from repetition, the memory of a carrot, the ghost of a bone. You eat quickly not because you're hungry, but because the heat fades fast. The pot itself never truly empties. It's never washed, only wiped. It carries the ghosts of every meal before a strange kind of ancestry made of leeks and marrow. The next stew will taste of this one, and the next, and the next. It's not preservation, it's survival. Someone sighs, someone burps, someone drops a spoon and curses under their breath. You all chuckle, not because it's funny, but because it's human. And at the end of the day, humanity is all you can afford. Historians still argue whether medieval food was nourishing or just sustaining, but they forget that hunger teaches you to find joy in enough, in barely, in just this once. You remember a time you had more, when a traveling monk traded salted fish for a carved spoon. The cottage smelled like the sea for days. You still dream about that meal. You don't remember the fish. You remember the feeling. Sometimes someone brings in something strange, a mushroom they hope isn't poison, a bird too small to name a handful of berries that might stain but might not kill. You add them to the pot and say a prayer. Sometimes the stew turns pink. Sometimes it turns black. You eat it anyway. There's no tablecloth, no silver, just wooden bowls, pewter spoons if you're fortunate. The fire pops. The children laugh. The dog lies beneath the bench, hoping for scraps. You toss a bit of crust. He misses. No one cares. This is the high point of your day. Not because it's special, but because it's stable. It comes every night, and that means something. The fire, the bowl, the hush that falls when everyone is finally full. You lean back, spine against the wall, legs stretched out, belly warm enough to stop the shiver. It won't last, but for now it's there. The candle flickers low. The stew thickens again in the pot. The silence becomes cozy. You can hear the wind scratching at the shutter. The house creaks but holds. You close your eyes, and for just a moment, brief and bright as embers, you feel peace. Because today, dinner happened, and that's a victory. You wake early not just to work, but to pay. Not in coin, not in silver, but in slices of your life handed over piece by piece to someone who lives in a stone house you've never entered, behind a door you'll never knock on. The Lord. You don't see him often, maybe once a year if that. Sometimes on a horse, surveying the land like it's an extension of his body. Other times, you hear his name muttered by the reeve, the man who does show up, the man who remembers what you owe even when you try to forget. The Lord owns the fields you plow, the forest you gather wood from, the stream where you sometimes fish. Even the sky feels borrowed. Everything you touch has his name attached to it, scribbled somewhere on a scroll you'll never read. Your grain taxed, your eggs counted, your labor expected. There is no bill, no receipts, just expectation and punishment. You owe part of your harvest, not after you eat, but before you feed your children, before you store it for winter, before you know whether the rats will come. You give because not giving invites questions. Questions lead to consequences, fines, or worse, the oven not yours. It sits near the edge of the village, covered in soot, warm with the heat of many loaves. But it's the Lord's oven. You must pay to use it. Even though it was your hands that gathered the wood, your daughter, who kneaded the dough, your back that carried the bundle. Historians still argue whether these dues were oppressive or simply the way of things. But when your belly is tight with hunger and someone still asks for a cut, you don't feel historical. You feel hollow. You've tried baking bread in a clay pot behind your cottage. The reeve found out. That cost you 2 chickens. You've tried grinding grain with a stone because the mill charges too much. That got you a visit from the bailiff, who smiled without humor and left with your only good knife. They say it's for your protection, that without the Lord bandits would come, that without his land you'd have none, that without his justice there would be chaos. But when your child shivers under a patched blanket and your wife serves broth with more water than bone, you wonder what protection means. You've seen the manor once from a distance. Stone walls, a roof that doesn't leak, glass maybe in the windows. They say his chambers are lined with fur, his meals served on silver, that he drinks wine while you chew on rye. You don't envy him, you don't hate him, you simply endure him, because to hate would be to risk too much. And risk is for men with spare lives. The steward comes once a season with his little book and his 2 clean shoes. He walks your land like it's his because it is. He counts your animals, asks how many sacks of barley you've milled, how many hours your son worked on the roads. He doesn't need your answers. He already has them. He writes with a stick dipped in ink. You wonder how long it takes for that ink to dry. You wonder if it smears. You never see the parchment again, but your name stays in his ledger, like bark carved with a dull knife. Once your pig escaped, got into the Lord's garden, ate half a row of something green and delicate. The reeve said you owed double taxes that year. The pig was slaughtered. You didn't taste a single piece. You pay even when you don't earn. In a bad year, you beg for time. You trade eggs. You trade wool. You trade silence. Sometimes they grant mercy. Sometimes they grant a warning. You know where the lines are. They're not drawn, but felt like a cold breeze under a closed door. You know which questions not to ask, which thoughts not to share. You teach your children the same, and still you find ways to bend the rules. A chicken kept off the list, a sack of rye buried beneath the floorboards, a deal with a neighbor to share 1 cow and name it as 2. These are your revolutions, quiet, clever, surviving by slipping through the cracks. At night when the house is quiet and the stew simmers low, you sometimes wonder what it would feel like to live without owing, to eat bread without counting the slices, to plant seeds and know they belong to you. You'll never know, but you pass the bowl around the fire. You kiss your child on the brow. You tighten your belt and smile when they're not looking, because you still have the most precious thing, the ability to endure, and that for now is not taxed. Night doesn't fall, in your world it spills, like ink across a page. One moment you can see the lines of the thatched roof, the curve of the hills in the distance, the pale shapes of geese settling in straw. The next, it's gone, replaced by a kind of darkness that doesn't just cover, but surrounds. Candles are a luxury, firewood even more so. You use them carefully, 1 log at a time, 1 taper burned only as long as needed. Shadows stretch along the walls, flicker against the rough plaster dance in the edges of your sight. You try not to imagine shapes there. You try harder not to listen, because night is not quiet. It creaks, it sighs, it hums in the beams and whispers in the spaces between stones. The dog barks at nothing. The wind taps like knuckles on the shutters. Somewhere far away, a bird calls wrong, low, unfamiliar. You feel the sound in your chest, and everyone knows night is when you hear the ghosts. Not the kind that rattle chains or drag feet, though people speak of those too. These ghosts are older, closer, quieter, the ones you know by name. The brother who coughed through one winter and never woke in spring. The child who was born and gone in the same week. The neighbor who went into the woods and never came back. You don't speak of them aloud. You feel them in the stillness, in the way the smoke hangs, in the way the dog refuses to sit near the door some nights. Historians still argue whether medieval people truly believed in spirits. But when you live beside death, when you wash it, bury it, eat beside it, sleep near it, you don't argue. You simply accept, and you prepare. A bit of iron set beside the threshold, herbs above the windows, sage, rue, rosemary. A cross drawn in ash over the hearth. A string tied around your baby's wrist, blessed by the priest. You do not ask if it works. You do not need it to work. You only need to believe that it might. Tonight, someone in the village says they saw lights in the forest. Not torches, other lights, blue, small, flickering. No one investigates. You never go towards strange lights in the dark. That's how people disappear. Your neighbor's chickens are restless. They say animals sense what people cannot. You watch your own dog ears up, back, stiff nose twitching. You whisper a prayer. You don't remember where you learned it. You say it anyway. Inside the cottage, everyone settles. Not into silence that never comes, but into stillness. The fire dims to embers. The air is thick, warm near the hearth, cold everywhere else. You lie beside your family's shoulder to shoulder, breath against breath. There's no privacy, no solitude, but also no loneliness. You hear your wife's breathing slow and steady, your child's small rustle, the creak of the floor as your father shifts. These sounds comfort you more than any lullaby, but you still feel them. The others, the ones who are gone but not far. The priest says they linger for prayers, that they walk the lanes when they're restless, that they wait for peace, that they're jealous of warmth. You leave a bowl of water near the door just in case. You leave a slice of bread on the sill, not every night, but tonight. You close your eyes and your ears open wider. The night becomes a landscape. Wind, wood, fire, cough. Footsteps? No, just your mind. You curl beneath your blanket. Straw pokes through the wool. Your hip aches. You think of the field, of the pot, of tomorrow. But mostly you wait for sleep, because sleep is the only place you can still visit the ones you've lost. And in dreams, no one is hungry. Sleep for you doesn't arrive in a single gentle descent. It comes in 2 acts, as the old women say, and the space between them is just as important as the sleep itself. The first act is short, heavy, and inevitable. You collapse into it, pulled under, like a stone into a pond. The day's weight drags your limbs still. You don't fall asleep, you surrender to it. Everyone in the cottage does the same. Children curl like cats near the hearth. The old man wheezes softly through a crooked nose. Your partner mumbles a few half-coherent words before slipping into silence. Even the dog, curled tight at the door, drifts into twitching dreams. For the first few hours the night holds you. The wind outside may whisper, and the house may creak, but your body sore, scraped, and full of broth doesn't stir. But it never lasts. Sometime after midnight, you wake. It's not sudden. It's not disturbing. It simply happens. One moment you're asleep. The next, your eyes are open and the darkness is vast. The air has cooled. The fire is now only embers. The only sound is the soft chorus of slow breathing around you. You are not alone in this waking. Half the village is likely awake with you, though no one says it aloud. You all wake in this second stretch, this middle chapter of night. The priest calls it the watch. Some call it the hollow. You just know it's when thoughts arrive uninvited. You stir the coals, careful not to wake anyone else. You sip from the clay mug left near the fire. Whatever's inside is cold now. You wrap your cloak tighter and sit in the dark. This is when the stories come, not told aloud, but in memory. You think of your mother's hands, your brother's laugh, a storm from 5 summers ago that knocked down the barn. You think of the girl you once saw at the spring, the one with the red hair. You think of what might happen if the barley fails, if the baby's cough gets worse, if the Lord raises the tax. You don't plan, you don't solve, you just sit and think and feel. Historians still argue whether segmented sleep was common, but you don't argue, you live it. And in this space between sleeps, the world is softer, slower, sacred. Some pray, whispered words mouthed in the dark. Others stitch or mend by moonlight. Some sit outside and watch the stars wheel above the trees. The sky is clearer at this hour, fewer fires, fewer eyes. The stars are cold, unblinking, steady. You stay awake for an hour, maybe 2. You don't track the time, only the slow return of the ache behind your eyes, the weight on your shoulders. You know when it's time. The second sleep is lighter, shorter, stranger. Dreams come quicker, now sharp and senseless. You dream of rivers that run uphill, of chickens, with human voices of your father telling you secrets in a language you don't know. You wake again just before dawn, not sure if it really happened. You rise slowly, carefully. Others do the same. No one speaks. It's too early for words. The day begins again. You tend the fire. Wash your face with cold water. Check on the stew. You stretch your legs and feel the tightness in your back. It's still there, but so are you. The rooster crows before the sun climbs, not because it's ready, but because it must. Like you. You rise not with purpose, but with necessity, because the fields won't wait. The roof still leaks, and the stew must be stirred before it becomes something worse. There's no ceremony to your mornings now, no quiet reflection or stretch of peace. The second sleep dissolves, and you're on your feet again, pulling stiff boots onto colder feet, stepping out into a world that greets you with mud, and yet you move forward, because survival is the only rhythm left. The Lord still owns the land. The steward still counts your barley. The reeve still knocks when it rains too long and too hard. But each time you open the door to face them, you have not broken. Not yet. And that matters. You plant seeds, not because you're sure they'll grow, but because it's the only answer you have to hunger. You mend clothes, not because they'll last forever, but because something has to. You rock the baby in your arms, not because it stops the crying, but because it tells the silence that someone is trying. You share food you cannot spare. You laugh at jokes that aren't funny. You give the last bit of honey to a neighbor with no teeth to chew bread. You do it not because you are saintly, but because you see them in the same way you hope someone sees you. This is not submission. This is not passivity. This is resistance. Historians still argue whether peasants were complicit in their own oppression, whether they simply accepted the burdens placed on them. But that's because they confuse quiet with consent. You've seen rebellion in the way someone hides a sack of rye beneath the floorboards, in the way a widow keeps an extra chicken and names it a cat. In the way someone slips out after sunset to leave herbs on a grave, even though the priest says not to. You bend, but you don't break. You kneel, but you rise again. Every day you stay in this field, in this house, in this life, you're pushing back against a world that would rather you disappear. That doesn't write your name in books or carve it in stone. That sees you as a number, a toll, a tide. But here within your walls, your name is spoken. Your hands are held. Your breath is felt in the warm space beneath the blanket. Your stories are told beside the fire in fragments, but remember, you're not a hero, you're not a warrior, you're not even free, but you endure. And that, in a world like this, is the most radical act of all. The field calls again, the pot bubbles low. Someone knocks, not the steward this time, just a neighbor with a broken fence and a hopeful look. You grab your cloak, you follow, because life, for all its weight, still moves, and you move with it. And now the fields are quiet. The embers are low, flickering soft shadows across the floor. The bowl has been emptied. The chores have been done. The shutters are closed. In your body, your aching, worn, quietly magnificent body is still. Breathe in slowly. Hold it. Let it go. The day you've walked through with its mud, its warmth, its ghosts, its grain is behind you now. There's no Lord asking for your tithe, no firewood left to stack, no coughs in the dark, just this moment. Here in this hush, you're safe. You are wrapped in layers, not of cloth, but of memory. The familiar scrape of a wooden spoon, the scent of rosemary still clinging to the doorframe, the rhythm of breath from the ones who sleep beside you. Close your eyes if they aren't closed already. Let your shoulders sink. Unclench your jaw. Loosen your grip on the day. You've survived another season. You've held the line between the old world and the next. You've done what needed doing, and more than you were thanked for. And now the second sleep waits soft, strange, and quiet. Let the crackle of the past fade gently, like footsteps lost in snow. Let the weight of wooden beams above you remind you that even rough shelter is still shelter. Let the ache in your bones be a lullaby, not a burden. The world will still be here tomorrow. The road, the fields, the fire, the breath of the earth beneath your feet. But for now, there's nothing left to fix, nothing left to carry, nothing left to fear. Only the deep slow fall into dreams. End of script. Sweet dreams.